I've had this copy of Web Vengeance by Segasoft for a while, and have toyed with the idea of making a video on it, as novelty software like this is mostly gone now. But there's one problem. This integrates with Internet Explorer from Windows 95 and was made for web pages from back then, so it would be almost impossible to show a program like this as it was meant to be used. Almost. You may know about the Internet Archive, which attempts to preserve the entire internet. It not only saves each page, but it also shows how each page changed over time, which means there are captures of data back when this software was released. And thanks to an awesome project, it's possible to give a vintage computer a look into the archive and basically trick it into having functional internet for any specific year. So, it should be possible to actually use a program like this how it was meant to be. Let's start out with the basics though. What is Web Vengeance? Actually, what it is better answered by covering why it is first. As computers became powerful enough to do almost anything the average user could want, programs started being made that were more toys than games. The goal is to distract the user for a few minutes rather than to try and entertain them. Screensavers fall into this. Sure, they had practical use, but just turning the display off or setting it to black would have actually worked better. So flying toasters, aquariums, and cartoon castaways were all extra flavor on top of protecting the monitor. This is the domain Web Vengeance falls into. It isn't a game per se, but a brief novelty experience. And it's exactly the kind of thing you would see on a discount software shelf as well. What Web Vengeance actually does is let you deface websites with all manner of implements of destruction. The website for Web Vengeance itself was thankfully fairly well preserved on archive.org, which is good for a number of reasons we'll cover in this video. From the website, you could download the software for free, so what exactly do I have? Well, the base software was free, but you had to buy add-ons for more weapons. So the physical copy I have includes almost all of them, which is good, because until now, I don't believe the non-free add-ons had been preserved. So I've uploaded a rip of this disc to archive.org if you want to check it out. So with what is in the box, I should have everything needed to check out Web Vengeance. It's a shame to break the cool custom Segasoft shrink wrap, but I would rather get it preserved digitally than preserve this one physically. There isn't much in the box, so the disc itself is really all we need. Before we install Web Vengeance, let's get a computer set up to be able to use it. The project I mentioned before is WaybackProxy, which allows you to tap into the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine to access older website copies. But the software presents as a proxy server you connect vintage computers to, so all they ever see is the original older HTML rather than the archive.org interface. All control is on the proxy server side, so the vintage system has no idea what's going on and just thinks this is the normal web. Setting up the software is delightfully simple. It's a Python program and should be cross-platform. I'm using Linux here. After you've downloaded the code from GitHub, you need to configure it. In config.json, you have a number of options, but the only ones you really need to pay attention to are the listen port, date, and date tolerance. You can change the port if needed, but leaving it at 8888 is fine. The date is the exact date you will ideally get a website capture from archive.org, but in reality, you need some wiggle room, which is where the tolerance comes in. Personally, I preferred setting a very large tolerance because getting something is better than nothing. Once you're happy with the settings, you can just run the main Python script to make it work. A minor note, if you need to change settings and close it, just wait a bit to rerun the program again if it gives you an error, because network stuff is weird. Now that we will be able to access websites, let's get Web Vengeance set up so we can try it. It's pretty straightforward with the install, though the disk did come with two other things, Alien Race and Heat. I installed them, but Alien Race wouldn't run. It looks like an online multiplayer game running over Heat. Services like Heat, 10, and GameSpy were online matchmaking networks for multiplayer games at the time. Back to the main focus though. Before we launch Web Vengeance for the first time, I'm going to open Internet Explorer and set up the proxy. Under Internet Options and Connections, we can open LAN settings to configure the proxy. Set the IP to the address of the computer running the proxy, and the port to what you have in the config file. With that, try going to a page and you should have access to the internet as it was long ago. It is so weird to be able to browse like this, though you do have to keep in mind that this is effectively read-only. None of the server-side stuff will work, so you can't search on Alta Vista or make a new page on GeoCities. Now that we have the web working though, we can try out Web Vengeance. Their whole marketing focus for this was attacking AOL, so let's head there and try this out. In the system tray, you'll find the program waiting. Open its menu and you can select a weapon. Then just click to attack the site. And that's pretty much it. Again, this isn't the peak of entertainment. This is just something you could spend 2 minutes doing between tasks. Now, the scope of this software isn't very deep, but it's actually fairly well implemented for what it is. The physical release comes with 6 different weapon packs, with 3 weapons each: Riot, Construction, Military, Medieval, Food Fight, and Urban Assault. All weapons have animations and sound, but some clearly got more love than others. The entire Food Fight pack is nice with the scaling sprites, but the knockoff Doom shotgun is probably the best animated, even down to the glove not everyone knows the Doom guy wears. The sound could use some more punch. The best overall, though, is the catapult, because you can right-click to change the ammo to... No! Now, of course, the damage you do to the site isn't actually happening on their server, even more obviously for me since I'm using this weird internet setup. But you can navigate to another page and come back and still see your destruction. This is in part because the software cheats a bit to apply your modifications. It was never going to do anything fancy like DOM manipulation to remove elements. Instead, when you start attacking, it takes a screenshot for you to make changes to. It never outright says this, but the website's FAQ alludes to this by saying it freezes things. This is done because the game appears to more directly access the frame buffer for the video card when it draws its final image. It's a little hacky to do this and can result in things like having graphic stuff on the edge of the start menu if it auto-hides, because it never redraws that part, just moves it. But painting the graphics on top of the web pages like this does make it so they can scroll with the site, at least until they are off screen, where they aren't redrawn until you do a refresh in the software. They also give you an option to save what you have done to a web page as a file. Then you could upload it to their own website on the Hall of Shame. Another page on this site also reports who blasted the most sites using the software. Shout out to Smithy for getting top billing there. Unfortunately, both of these pages were only captured once, so that's all we can see. It's interesting looking through what websites people, or let's be honest, kids were attacking though. My favorite has to be the .gov page for the FCC on the V-chip. These aren't links to those sites though. They are, or were, downloads for these users' damage files, none of which I think were saved. You can reopen the saved files, which will bring you back to the damaged page and add all the damage to it. Looking at the Hall of Shame a little closer, there are an awful lot of hits on this site itself, but probably not just because it was a quick test target. If you attempt to attack the Web Vengeance site, you are blocked. All of the different weapon packs each have a different kind of block as well. Their site has a section for webmasters that tells you how you can add this to any site with an HTML comment line. I have a website I host with old HTML for testing stuff like this, and tried adding it there, but I couldn't get it working, even after putting a line all over in the page. I'm not exactly sure how Web Vengeance is checking the page for this line. It doesn't show up in Internet Explorer's plugins folder, but it's clearly tapping in somehow to read which web pages are being displayed and to reload data. The block works on other Segasoft pages with the line as well, so I don't think it's just hard-coded for specific URLs. On that, this is by Segasoft, which feels a little weird for Sega to be making something like this when they were definitely more of a prestigious game developer of the time. Well, Segasoft is related to, but not directly, Sega. I'm not completely sure what their corporate structure was, but I think Segasoft was both a subsidiary and sister to Sega of America. They were only around from 1995 to 2000, so they didn't have a huge impact, but they released a few titles I at least recognize. And that pretty much sums up Web Vengeance. Really, I was just using this as an excuse to learn how to use WaybackProxy, which I have some ideas for that I'll be trying later, but this was a fun little time waster like it was meant to be. So, I enjoyed this look back. If you did too, you may want to subscribe to the channel, and if you want to help support me, I am on Patreon. But for now, that's it, and I will see you next time.